Hey, what's going on guys, it's TECHOSAUR and I just got the JSAUX transparent backplate, the Vents version. In a previous video, I covered the first model, that is the RGB version, and another backplate made by HandheldDIY. I'll link that video above if you want to check out the unboxing experience and the installation process. In that video, I also showed the Black Shark cooler as an add-on to the HandheldDIY back cover. Instead of the RGB version, this one is more focused on cooling. So let's see how it goes and compare it against the other ones we tried previously, in order for you to know which one is the best when it comes to cooling. So let's get started. It comes with this accessory box including a glove, screwdriver, some other freebies such as battery sticker, joystick caps and back button pad. It also comes with this silicone cover for the eGPU port to stop dust from entering that area, and it just looks cleaner this way. And this is a battery sticker. As you can see, it looks pretty cool. The original RGB one has a white accent. This one instead has a red hue to it. And now here is the main star, which is the heatsink. Connect more, power more. It's like their slogan. Wow, it looks pretty cool. Feels heavy, not quite heavy, but I would say like it's a decent weight. Before putting it in, make sure to peel off the thermal pad sticker, and as you can see, it's designed in a way that goes pretty well with the ROG ALLY internals and heatsink in mind. So they designed it exclusively for it. And if you are curious to know the weight of the heatsink, it's 40 grams and all made in aluminum. Now let's get started first by removing the HandheldDIY back cover that I had previously installed. And I must say that the nice thing about this cover is that you can put the tall copper heatsink, which is 9mm in height, without an issue. It just lifts off some mark on the thermal pad. Now the important thing I need to do first is covering the light sensor, because as you know, the ROG ALLY, if it detects any light, it wouldn't turn on the main board. So since this cover is transparent, it may pick up some light and prevent the light from turning on. Therefore, to avoid that, we're gonna have to hide it by using this sticker that's also included in the box. The DIY one doesn't need it, but the JSAUX one comes always with it. So I've just placed it in, and now let's put on the battery sticker. Being a transparent cover, it's quite thoughtful of them to make a battery sticker to hide the original foil. And as you can see with the JSAUX heatsink, we cannot put the tall heatsink for the SSD as well. Therefore, we're going to have to remove this one. Instead, we're going to use the slim heatsink. And anyways, for all covers benchmark, it's the one I used all along. So it's only natural to use it with this one as well in order to have accurate result. So we're good to go. Now we can just install the heatsink just fine. As you can see here, it should align well with the top screw hole. And I must say it makes good contact with the internals, so it got pretty well into place. Now the next step, I'm going to remove the back buttons and the triggers from the existing cover to the new one. Keep in mind that none of those third-party covers have them included, so you will need to use the original ones that comes with the ALLY. Okay, so for the back buttons we are done. Let's move on to the triggers. Alright, we're done with all. We covered the light sensor and everything is good, so we can safely close it. Let's test the back buttons, and they are clicky, no issue whatsoever. The shoulders are good too. Let's hope the thermals will be good as well. So yeah, that's the JSAUX Vents version. Now it's the time to start some benchmarking, and we're going to do it at different TDP levels in order to see how sustainable to heat each cover is in worst case scenario. I'll be using G-Helper to control the wattage across 20, 30, 35, 40, and finally 45 watt. And to ensure the power limits will remain consistent during the benchmark, I adjusted them as well in BIOS by using the smokeless tool. So in this way, they wouldn't conflict with the settings set in the OS. If you are curious about how to do all of that, check out my new video guide on how to break the limits of 30 watt TDP on the ROG ALLY. Now the first thing, let's do a time spy benchmark in custom mode at 900p. And by looking at the score, there is nothing significant. In fact, just because we swapped the back cover doesn't mean we are suddenly turning the ALLY into the ALLY Pro, or something as some may claim. The scores are all pretty much within the same range, indicating that all covers are able to manage heat effectively in this specific test without throttling down performance. However, this might not always be the case, as it also depends on the workload type, as we'll see in a bit. Now moving on to time spy stress test, where it goes through 20 loops in order to simulate a 20 minutes of gameplay. Now with the test done, checking out the temperature, for the CPU, the JSAUX vents recorded 67.8 C for CPU, 48.2 for the GPU, and 55 for the SSD. Compared to other back covers, it had a slightly higher CPU temperature. But on the other hand, SSD temperature was quite lower. At 30 watt, the JSAUX vents had a higher CPU temperature again, but lower GPU and SSD temperature. At 35 watt, it was 81.4 C for the CPU, 67.5 for the GPU, and 60 for the SSD, which is 10-degree difference compared to the HandheldDIY. At 40 watt, things start to balance. This time the JSAUX vent had 79.2 degrees for the CPU, while the JSAUX RGB plate reached 85.3. Instead, HandheldDIY back plate recorded 85.4 degrees, and adding the Black Shark cooler to the HandheldDIY, temperature dropped to 80.9 degrees. Now as for the GPU, we also see a lower temperature with the JSAUX vent, as well as a similar trend with the SSD, having a consistent 10 degrees difference between the JSAUX vent and the competition. At 45 watts, there was no temperature difference for the CPU between the vents version and the HandheldDIY, but there was a noticeable improvement over the JSAUX RGB version. GPU recorded about a lower 4 degrees difference compared to the HandheldDIY, while the SSD showed a massive 12-degree difference in this high wattage setup. It's incredible because when looking at the thermal images, the JSAUX vent seems to trap heat around the heatsink area quite effectively, where compared to the other back covers like the stock one, heat is more dispersed. The JSAUX vent design does a good job of easier heat dissipation by trapping it in a contained spot, leading to lower temps externally, so in this way, as you hold it you will feel it's quite cool even at a high TDP. Moving on to Cinebench multi-core test, this time we'll see how a highly demanding CPU workload affect in Temp. While scores don't show a significant difference, but at least at 45 watt, the JSAUX vents version scored the highest with 15,421, which is a small improvement over the stock and the RGB version, so nothing to brag about. Instead, in terms of temperatures, at 20 watt, for JSAUX vent, the maximum was 59.1 degrees for the CPU, 43.2 for the GPU, and 52 for the SSD, which is quite lower than the one achieved by stock and HandheldDIY back covers. At 30 watt, the same trend continues with JSAUX vents winning over. Now the good stuff happened if we switch over to the 45 watt setup, with the CPU reaching the maximum temperature of 91 C, 70.9 for the GPU, and finally 63 for the SSD. Now the key takeaway is that even at 45 watt TDP, the JSAUX vents never reach the CPU TJ max of 95 degrees, which is the maximum limit, while all other configurations did so. Also, the JSAUX vents had lower temperature by about 5 degrees for both GPU and SSD compared to other setups, claiming the lowest temp champ. Finally, let's move on to a gaming test. We'll do a Cyberpunk benchmark to measure temps. At 20 watt, the maximum temperature reach is 45 C, which is similar to the HandheldDIY plus cooler. Now that we have seen at the lowest TDP of 20 watt, but going all the way to 45 watt, here we see a maximum CPU temp at 81 for the JSAUX vent, which is pretty comparable to the competition. As for GPU, it's 76 compared to 79 for the HandheldDIY one. However, the advantage is that the JSAUX vent doesn't need an active fan cooler to achieve those temperatures, making it a hassle-free solution, like just install and forget about it without having to deal with an external cooling unit or any additional cable. So overall, the JSAUX vents is a significant upgrade over the RGB version. If you already had the RGB panel version, you can get the heatsink sold separately from JSAUX website directly and swap out the RGB panel with the heatsink, as the back cover is exactly the same, making it compatible with the previous version. And finally, it's worth noting that in all my tests, the JSAUX vents offer the best SSD temperature ever on my hot running SSD, with over 12 degrees less than the handheld DIY one and other setup. All I had is a low-profile copper heatsink installed, and it was enough to cool it. In my personal opinion, JSAUX has crafted a brilliant 40-gram aluminum heatsink for their existing cover that fits perfectly, looking aesthetically nice, while keeping all internal components significantly cooler, making the line much cooler to hold. Please keep in mind that I bought all those covers out of my own pocket and wasn't offered a promotional unit. And if you found this review helpful, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to TECHOSAUR for more future content. And thanks also for our first member ever, Yutongdwan. I hope I spelled the name right. And thanks also for everyone that has been supporting this channel. See you guys in the next one.